You're live.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. It's been a while since we've talked, and here I am from the United States. My name is Suzanne Meriden. I'm with the Syrian American Council here in the U.S. I say it's been a while since we talked, and I wish we had better news to discuss than the last time we were together. However, the story of Syria continues. The Assad regime, along with the Russian regime and the Iranian regime, are still killing innocent Syrian civilians. They are taking liberated land away from these innocent Syrian civilians, and people are dying on a daily basis. And people are still having to flee and still having to get away from the bombs and from the atrocities and the genocide that's taking place in Syria. To be honest with you, with so many phone calls and so many conversations, I don't recall the last call we had, but just a few weeks ago, Daraa was the final city to go under this atrocious bombardment. The Syrian people in Daraa had to flee over to the Jordanian border. Of course, all countries around Syria have closed their borders for many reasons. One, they can no longer sustain any more refugees. Two, for security purposes. And so people were stuck at the border, and people were stuck under the harsh summer sun. People were stuck without water, without food, without any medical help. And thank goodness for the Jordanian people themselves, not even the government at one point, but the Jordanian people actually were the ones who went out and, brought food and medical help and some compassion to the people. We do actually thank the Jordanian government for allowing for some of these logistics to take place. And unfortunately, the regime did their regular deals that they have done that we've always discussed. Some people fled to never return, others returned home, but they were returning to homes with no furniture, no belongings, and they were basically scared to return because they knew they were returning back to death. And as usual, people were bussed away, taken away, and you all recall Dr. Abdul Qafi Al Hamado, who's with us today. I'll introduce our guests in just a bit, but to remind us of the stories, Abdul Qafi was in Aleppo last year when the Aleppo offensive took place, and he was one of the ones who had to leave home with his family, and he was taken to Idlib, and that's actually where the story brings us today. Today, we're worried about Idlib because that's the next offensive that we're looking at. We worry the Assad regime and Russia also go on an offensive. We're talking about millions and millions of people who will want to flee death again to borders where they won't be able to get in. Idlib is at the border of Turkey. Turkey has already taken so many refugees, and we worry about what's going on there. We are, as Syrians and Syrian Americans, we're communicating with the Turkish government, with the U.S. government, with people inside on the ground, trying to determine what we can do to make sure the offensive doesn't take place. Otherwise, we'll have many, many dead. Many will have to flee. The refugee crisis will continue. The same refugee crisis that the international community is trying to solve, it will continue and become worse. And so we hope international leaders take note and stop the genocide before it happens so that we don't have more dead people, more refugees, more internally displaced people. So that was just a quick update to you, but let's go to our guests because they are the ones that will be able to tell us the real story, what is happening, and this is why we love these calls. It's because we hear it straight from everyone. So, of course, I told you we have Dr. Abdul Qafi Al Hamado, who we will start with in just a little bit because he is right there inside Idlib. We do have another activist that might join us. You recall there's always internet issues coming from Syria, and so we're not sure if we'll be able to get him online. We will also be able to talk to the wonderful artist Mark Nelson from the Chicago area, who has been an incredible, incredible source of comfort to many of us activists, but of course to people like Dr. Abdul Qafi inside Idlib because he continues with conversations. He has his students joining and talking and drawing artistry to help um, share what the stories are all about. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. And of course, we'll also be joined by Dr. Zaki Lababidi from Arizona, who's the president of the Syrian American Council. Dr. Lababidi has incredible connections directly from inside Syria, and he will be able to shed with us some perspective on what world leaders are discussing currently and what we're worried about. So let's start with our first guests. A quick reminder, usually we do Arabic translation. However, from surveys from our audience, we were told that to keep things in English would be just fine, as they want more time to hear directly from our guests. Abdul Qafi, can you hear us? You're actually on mute. Can you unmute yourself? Abdul Qafi, we can't hear you. We need you to unmute yourself, please. You're on mute. If I'll give us just a couple of seconds, Abdul Qafi is figuring out his calling situation. So as we wait on Abdul Qafi, actually we were just joined by Farid Al-Hour. Farid, how are you? كيف صحة؟
الحمد لله. كيفك انت؟
تمام والله تمام. سامعنا ما هيك؟
ايه سامعكم.
اوكي كثير منيح كثير منيح. اهلا وسهلا. Abdul Qafi, can you hear us now? Can you talk?
Can you hear me or not?
I can hear you, but there's a loud sound from your headphones. Can you do it without the headphones?
Now it's better?
Yes, much better. Much better.
That's okay.
Abdul Qafi, welcome back to our calls. We're so glad to have you here. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Thank you for everyone here. Thank you for the audience who are hearing us. Thank you for the amazing marketing. So in fact, I'm so happy for with all those people who support Syria, people from outside Syria. In fact, this helps a lot people inside when they know that there is a kind of support from people all over the world. In fact, I want to speak about what's going on inside Syria, exactly in Idlib these days. In fact, people in general now are so worried. They are so afraid. They are scared. They don't know what to do. Now, the most question repeated in streets, in schools, in houses, what will happen? If something bad happens, where will we go? No other place to go to. So, in fact, this makes a kind of stress situation, stress environment. People now, after being displaced, most people living now in Idlib, they are not from Idlib itself. They are already displaced from their hometowns, like exactly what happened to me, and finally with what happened to Daraa. So these people said, okay, we're displaced now. We still in pain because we are away from our homes, our houses. But now, if something bad happened, I mean, another offensive, in fact, it will be destructive. Here, the humanitarian situation is something unbelievable. I mean, imagine that most people, we have here about more 4 million people, most of them are displaced. Most of them are without houses. About 90% are without works. About 70% are without enough treatment, without enough food, of course, and without any electricity and enough water. So just imagine about such a humanitarian situation, and with expected hell that might come anytime by Assad regime and the the other militias that support it. I'm speaking about Iranian, Iraqi, and Hezbollah militias who always warn us and make a kind of threaten us every time by boasts, by some media statements saying that we are going to take over Idlib. For sure, people, what I want to make sure that people inside Idlib now, they say that although we don't have any place to go to, but we know that the way to heaven is much shorter to the way to the Assad regime areas. People here can't, stand with going back to regime. The one who killed their children, destroyed their homes and their cities, who, prisoned hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of people, and this regime is killing these people every day in a Holocaust that all the world are silent about.
Abdul Khafi, thank you. I want to touch base on a couple of things that you mentioned, and I appreciate you just sort of venting out what the feelings are, because you are speaking on behalf of a whole community that's in Idlib. So we certainly appreciate that. So I know you said the people are scared. What's the day-to-day conversation? Are people living normal routine lives, or is it just chaos? What is life like? Because we know that you're already experiencing some bombardment, not an actual offensive yet, but you still experience some. So what is daily life like in Idlib right now?
Sorry, I didn't hear well, so I will put my headphones, and you can just to be able to listen carefully. Then I will take them off when I speak.
Okay, no problem. Abdul Khafi, I was saying that you alluded to the fact that people are scared, that they're not sure what to expect. They know something is coming, and you called it hell. They're expecting hell to come. And so we're just wondering what's in Idlib. Do they have regular routines they adhere to, or is it chaotic? Because we know even though an offensive hasn't started, you're still experiencing some bombardment. So what is daily life like right now?
Okay. Yes, me about the daily life with the expectation of the coming hell. Okay, did I hear well?
I'm sorry, what was your answer?
Yeah, okay.
انه الناس كيف عايشه ومتعايشه هلا كل يوم، يعني عندهم روتين ولا يعني شو عم يصير معهم من الخوف. Go ahead.
Okay. In fact, yes. Thank you very much for this. In fact, today I was in a school for kids. I was there just to teach, okay, them in summer. When I went there, in fact, I saw two of my students who were sad. I asked them, what happened? I mean, why are you sad? They told me, in fact, their fathers want them to leave to Turkey because they are afraid of the coming attack. I told them, is it okay to leave now? I mean, I think the borders are closed. They said, yes, this is the problem, that no way to run away. Nevertheless, their parents are so scared about them, and I'm speaking about the children. They said, we don't want to leave Syria. We don't want to leave our friends, our homes. We want to stay here because they are from Idlib. But our fathers are so scared. Every day and night they are speaking about the same issue. They said even their families started, selling their belongings, and even the markets here, I mean, selling and buying, the trade in general stopped. People now are afraid. I mean, they don't buy anything. For me, for example, my wife is asking me to buy some furniture for the house, some sofa and like this. I said, let's wait. We don't know what will happen. You see that life, it's somehow stopped. People in general, don't have any thoughts of how to develop their lives, because anytime everything might be destroyed. So for this, people are thinking only of, okay, waiting. In fact, waiting for what? We don't know. Waiting, what should we do after waiting? Yeah, again, we don't know. Waiting is something very, very difficult. It reminds me, in fact, in a play that I read and I teach at the university, which is called Waiting for Godot. In fact, yeah, this is exactly what it's happening with us. We're waiting. Whom? We don't know.
Yes.
What? We don't know. but we should wait, because we see that, we are helpless, and we don't have this decision. I mean, we can't make any decision. People here are still vulnerable. They can't invulnerable, in fact, and they can't defend themselves. So we should speak to the world to keep their eyes on these people. Um, they might do something at least to stop this.
Sure, thank you. And speaking of keeping eyes on Idlib, yesterday, of course, there was a Twitter storm that took place that caused 1 million impressions. We hope that someone in the international community was watching and receiving the messages and knowing that there are people inside Idlib waiting, basically, with such an unknown. That was such an important point for us to understand, Abdul Qafi, because you're right, life is at a standstill. So on that note, and don't go anywhere, please, because I want to come back to another point that you mentioned. But speaking of not knowing what to expect, if we can go to Dr. Zeki for just a couple of minutes, we would love to hear from Dr. Zeki his thoughts on whether an offensive on Idlib is coming or not. Dr. Zeki, are you with us? Dr. If you can hear us, can you unmute yourself and speak?
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now. Yes, yes. Did you hear my
Very
question,
good.
Dr. Zeki?
No, go ahead, repeat it, please. I'm sorry.
Sure. No, absolutely, absolutely. Dr. Abdul Qafi from Inside Idlib right now was just talking about how life is at a standstill inside Idlib. People just don't know what to expect. Everyone is expecting the regular offensive from Assad and Russia and Iran, but there's just such an unknown. And I know within your work, you are consistently in conversation with officials and people on the ground. So we would love to hear from you what you think might be coming towards Idlib.
Idlib, unfortunately, it's going to be a major problem if the Assad regime decided, with his Iranian backers, the militias and the Revolutionary Guards and everybody else that backing him in his atrocities, to attack Idlib. It's going to be a disaster, as Abdul Qasi said, because there is millions of people in Idlib. This is not like Daraa, where it's only a few 100,000, or Ghouta, a few 100,000, or even Aleppo, there was only 250,000 people. This is where everybody that displaced inside Syria has been sent, from Homs, from Damascus, from Daraa, from everywhere. The offensive, is it going to happen or not? It is really unknown at this time. The countries around Syria, Russia, the United States, France, and UK are in a race to stop the offensive from the countries that on the west, Russia and Iran, in a race to get the offensive going and finish what they call liberation of Syria, which is actually exactly the opposite, is going to be subjecting the Syrian back to their regime and treated, unfortunately, worse than animals. The regime is already arresting people in Daraa and Al Ghouta, in contrast to the agreement with the people on the ground, and taking the youth to his army to fight in Idlib, actually in other areas. We're trying our best with Turkey, with Russia, with US, UK, and France, to make sure that we stop the offensive. We have contacts at the UN, also that trying to convince Russia not to back such an offensive, because it will be much worse than any other area that the Assad regime attacked. The people on the ground we talk to also to see what's happening. There's two kind of people. The one who are carrying weapons and they want to defend their land and their homes and their families, and the other people who think that they're going to lose no matter what, because the Assad regime, when they don't win using conventional weapons and attacking areas, then they use chemical weapons, which nobody can, resist and win against, and then they take the area over. So many civilians saying, "Well, we're gonna die anyway." The Assad regime. We've seen what they do. They start with conventional weapon. They lose. They use napalm. They use phosphorus bombs, and when that doesn't work, even then the chemical weapons come and they take the area anyway. So they are actually, like Abdul Qasi said, not only they're not buying things and they're worrying all the time, but some of them even they're planning their escape route. It's like when in other countries you plan escape route from hurricanes, from natural disasters. In Idlib, they're planning their escape route if the butcher of Syria finally decided to attack and overrun the Idlib province. It is going to be very difficult because the population is very dense. It's difficult to control. There is a lot of people have weapons and want to resist. So the Assad regime, I think, is calculating also, can he win in Idlib? Would the countries of the world be silent again when they see atrocities now, not against 100,000 or 200,000, but millions of people will be on the move? Would Turkey allow the regime to attack their soldiers and their military points that they have as a guarantee to the Astana agreement? All these questions are up in the air, and only time will tell. Every diplomat we talk to in these countries say, we're trying our best to prevent it, but we don't know what is on Putin's mind. Unfortunately, a strong country like Russia is controlled by one man. And when countries are controlled by one man dictator, not a government, you don't know what to expect. And that's our problem with Russia. And as you all know, the Russian army is the second strongest army in the world after the American army. There's not a single army in the world that can stop the Russian except the American army. And we're not sure that Russia we're not sure that the United States want to go into a war with Russia over Syria. And that's where Putin calculation go into. I can run over Idlib, I can get all of Syria back under the butcher control, and no country will challenge me on that because Syria is not worth a fight with Russia to save the Syrian people. We're trying to convince this country the opposite. We're trying to have them warn the butcher of Syria regime against the offensive, and that's going to be costly for them in all kind of aspects on the ground in the relationship with the rest of the world, and possibly, hopefully, we convince the surrounding countries to give the fighters on the ground some weapons that they can resist the helicopters that drop these barrel bombs and other weapons that destroy the civilian areas. And that's their tactics usually. What they did in Ghouta, what they did in Daraa, they do not attack the fighters, they attack the civilians to a point. Psychologically, the fighters are broken and they have to go back and basically just look after their families who are under the rubbles of their homes, and leave their posts in front. That's what they did in many areas, and unfortunately it worked for them. Of course, these are war crimes, but Russian and of course the Bashar of Syria regime they do not care about that. They've been committing war crimes for 7 years, and they're continuing to do that.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Dr. Zaki. That was a lot of great detail that I think many needed to hear. And please stick around with us because we'll get back to you. But as Dr. Zaki said, all eyes are on Idlib, all eyes are on Turkey, and all ears are still open to the United States of America as everyone waits for, to hear what the U.S. is going to do, and as they like to follow lead. So we hope that this instance will be different from any other instance. Whether that hope will come through or not, we don't know. But our job is to continue advocating and working to try and get the best final solution. I want to get back to Farid quickly because I know he's calling from inside Idlib, and a lot of times the internet is not forgiving. So let's talk to Farid الحور. Farid, أنت معنا؟
ايه معكم.
فريد يمكن
سمعوني.
حضرتك بتفضل نحكي بالعربي ما هيك؟
تمام.
Okay, tamam. Farid is a social media activist. He is in Idlib right now. His preference is that we speak in Arabic, so we will do a quick translation from Arabic. But let's see what Farid has to say. Farid, بما إنه أنا شوي يعني بدي أحكي بالإنجليزي مشان يعرفوا الناس عن شو عم تحكي. إذا بتحكي بي يعني هيك شوي مشان أقدر أعطي بالإنجليزي شو عم تقلنا حضرتك. بس أعطينا فكرة حضرتك من إدلب ولا جيت على إدلب، وشو رأيك بالموضوع هلا بالنسبة للي عم تسمعه؟ تفضل.
الرأي على الإيراني عن تدخل ميليشيات إيراني بسوريا، مو تمام؟
أيوة.
تمام. استند صعود دور إيران في النطاق الإقليمي في البعد الأيديولوجي للنظام إلى خلق أذرع عسكري غير رسمي أو سياسي وعسكري داخل الدول.
فريد صوتك بس عم يروح، إذا فيك تعيد بلا إنه راح صوتك من عندي.
تمام. استند صعود دور إيران في النطاق الإقليمي في البعد الأيديولوجي للنظام الذي وظف إلى خلق أذرع عسكري غير رسمي أو كسب ولاء قوى سياسي وعسكري داخل الدول.
تمام. وحضرتك بذكرني، حضرتك من إدلب ولا جيت من إدلب من غير منطقة؟
لا، أنا من إدلب.
So Farid, as we said, is a social media activist. He is actually from Idlib, and he is currently in Idlib. And he's basically talking to us about the role of the Iranian militias in this in these activities taking place currently, and the fact that the militias are really propping up the Syrian regime, just as Russia is propping as well. طب وفريد، شو عم تشوف حضرتك وشو رأيك باللي حكوا عنه الدكتور عبد القافي والدكتور زكي، وشو عم تتوقع؟
النفوذ الإيراني في سوريا أدى إلى فشل الحل السياسي، لأن رفضت مقررات جنيف التي تنطلق من أرضية التوافق حول الانتقال السياسي وفقا لقرارات مجلس الأمن الدولي ذات الصلة، وراهنت على الحل العسكري والقضاء على المعارضة بالقوة.
So Farid is basically, his passionate conversation this morning is that Iran was really the reason that a political transition in Syria was not able to take place, that the Syrian opposition failed to do what it went out to do due to the role that the Iranian regime and militias had taken inside Syria. And so it is because of them that the Syrian people have had to endure what they have endured. And this actually has been the running conversation from many of our calls over the past few months. The propping up that the Iranian regime did of Assad and his people is what has basically killed so many Syrians and so many innocent people. And of course, we're seeing that today in Iran itself, where major protests are taking place against the Iranian regime. And the Iranian people have stood by the Syrian people, recognizing that their regime is really responsible for what is taking place inside Syria. طب أنت هلا شو حابب تشوف؟ يعني أنا حابة أعرف منك إنه أنت شو متوقع حيصير. بنعرف إنه إيران هي يلي ورا كل اللي عم يصير، وبنعرف إنه روسيا طبعا إلى يد، بس بما انك قاعد بإدلب، انت من إدلب، شو حابب تشوف وشو حابب يصير؟
رغم تدخل روسيا عسكريا في سوريا واخر عام 2015 وتحالفها مع إيران على أراضي المعارك المشتركة، غير أن موسكو تدرك اختلاف دوافع إيران للتعاون معها في سوريا نظرا لتاريخ العلاقات بين البلدين الذي أخذ طابع التعاون تارة والتنافس تارة أخرى. وبعد توصل كل من روسيا وتركيا وإيران إلى اتفاق خفض التصعيد أواخر العام 2016 على الأراضي السورية كدول ضامنة له، ظهر هذا الاختلاف جليا بعدم التزام إيران به سعيا منها لتحقيق مكاسب ميدانية وسياسية وعسكرية.
So Farid is talking also about, the fact that when Russia came in 2015, that complicated issues, but there were lots of conversations between different countries, including Russia, Turkey, and others, but Iran still had not adhered to those discussions, and so that's why no solutions have come, and no outcome has come. طيب فريد، بدي أسألك بس أنت بما أنك تشتغل بالسوشيال ميديا، كيف حاولت انه توصل هالصوت وهالقصص عبر السوشيال ميديا، بما انه هو هلا يعني اكثر طريقه الواحد بيقدر يبعد الصوت للاعلام وللعالم يعني؟
أنا بشتغل محل دعاية وإعلان زين سيارات. أنشأت حساب تويتر وصرت أغرد عليه. صرت أغرد إيش بيصير معنا بالحياة الطبيعية، وصور القصف وصور الدمار وقصف الطيران الطائرات الروسية شنو عم تقصف وعم تقتل العوالم المدنيين. عندي فيديوهات كثير وصور بتوثق هالشيء يعني. وصرت توصل صوتي للعالم مشان العالم كلها يشوف نحن السوريين نحن بإدلب شلون عم نقتل ونذبح وما حدا سائل علينا، والعالم كلها قاعد وعم بيتفرج علينا يعني.
تمام، الله يعطيكم العافية. ونحن يعني قد ما حاولنا نعبر عن الشيء اللي عم نعمله هون والشغل تبعنا، هذا ما بيطلع شيء من اللي انتم عم تشوفوه وتعملوه، فسامحونا اذا نحن يعني ما عم نقدر نوصل الصوت مثل ما لازم، ولكن نحن معكم.
شكرا كثير انسه سوزان.
شكرا لك والله. So because Farid is a social media expert, and because he was talking to us about the political scene from not just the Assad regime offensive, but of course the Iranian offensive, Russia, etc. The question to him was, how did he use his social media skills in order to get his voice out to the people? And so basically he was documenting through pictures, through stories, through video, and really trying to send the voice out to everyone. And he documented bombardment. He documented all sorts of scenes taking place. And, it's so important to have this discussion, because right before we started our call, some of us were talking about how we really, none of us knew that we would be sitting here one day having these discussions. And that usually when we talked about genocide or a Holocaust or atrocities, they were always in the context of something in the past, something historical. Yet here we are with someone like Farid, who is actually sharing history that's taking place now. They are sharing stories that are taking place now. And if it weren't for social media, the way the revolution in Syria, the way the Arab Spring have been told, would not have been able to even take place at some points, because that's where all of the organization for the protests, etc., took place. So, although we are still in a place where we're experiencing genocide, etc., and people like Farid must be so frustrated that even when they get out these stories, the international community is still not, taking action. It is still important because they are documenting history that some are actually trying to erase. And erasing is the fear right now, but there are many like Farid and others, and we're going to go right now to Mark Nelson, who is helping document what is taking place, and we will hear from him. Farid, أنا بس كنت عم أقول إنه الشغل يلي حضرتك تعمله من عبر السوشيال ميديا مهم إلنا كتير كتير هلأ، لأنه عم نحكي كنا الصبح إنه في منا عم نقعد ونقول مو معقول إنه هالقصص عم تصير هلأ. بالعادة الواحد وقت بيحكي عن هيك قصص مخيفة لهالدرجة بتكون بالتاريخ، ولكن أنتوا عم تساعدوا إنه تعملوا documentation لهالقصص، وهذا شيء كتير مهم، لأنه في ناس من النظام تبع الأسد ومن روسيا ومن إيران عم يحاولوا إنه يخفوا هالقصص. فشكرا لكم انه عم تعبروا لنا شو عم يصير. وهلا بدنا نحكي مع مارك نيلسون لانه هو كمان كان عم يحكي بنفس الموضوع. Mark, how are you?
تمام.
I just want to say really quick, love to Fareed, love to you, Suzanne, love to Abdul Kafi. I think about you all the time, and you're in my heart always. So I hope you know that. One of the things today is the 30th anniversary of the 1988 massacre in Iran, where 30,000 political prisoners were executed. And the point, one of the things we got to remember with this massacre is that the Iranian government tried to cover it up, literally. They've destroyed the graves. They're trying to erase history the same way the Nazis wanted to erase history, the same way my own country wanted to erase the history of slavery and racism. This is the danger. And I think us in the West need to realize this. And my students, they ask me, Mr. Nelson, how could the Holocaust happen? Why would people allow this to happen? And it hurts me so bad because, like Suzanne said, there are people right now in front of our faces crying for help, saying, I am here, please help me. And yet still there's inaction, still. And so our job in the West, where we are able to speak and say things, is to do that. Because the danger I see as a student of history is the idea that everything gets glossed over. That Assad would be able to come into power and erase all the million of lives that have been destroyed by him. And that in a couple of years, these dictators think that this history will be forgotten. And you, Fareed, and Abdul Kafi, you are active witnesses to this. And it's our job, Suzanne and I and anyone in the West, to make your voices heard and to make sure that you stay in front of people's faces, because that's the biggest danger. We have a short attention span in the West. One news story will happen, we'll move to the next news story. And that is what Assad hopes will happen to Syria. He hopes that we will all forget about it and that he will be able to be not pay for the crimes that he has done. And we're going to make sure that does not happen. And we want to make sure that the civilians, the group that I'm active with, our main goal is to try to bring awareness to people like Fareed and Abdul Kafi and all the women and children who are trapped in this situation and are in danger all the time. And that is our goal. And I wish we could do more. But the fact that I'm talking to you right now, and yet people still don't pay attention. It's hard to understand. And it's hard for me to talk to my students about that because it breaks my heart to say, I know exactly why the Holocaust happened, because people didn't want to get involved. People they wanted to look away. And that's the biggest danger. That's the biggest danger that I see in the West.
So, Mark, I want to talk a little bit about you, and especially there's a perfect segue here because you said people want to look away. So, Mark is a teacher from the Chicago area, and he's an artist, and he uses his art to communicate what is happening inside Syria. And I know as a Syrian American myself who was involved with the revolution from the very beginning and who wanted to share the stories, etc., there was always this conflict and debate on social media on whether you show the pictures coming out of Syria, the atrocities, the pictures of dead children, blood, people dying, innocent people just dying from dictators that don't want to give them their freedom. And, you know, those of us who were very in tune and wanted to tell the stories sometimes were offended at those who said, we don't want to see these pictures because we're so sad and we're so hurt. And so there wasn't a right or wrong. It was about feelings. But then comes along someone like Mark Nelson, who wanted to still be able to show these pictures and the atrocities, but understood that these pictures were so harsh that some people's hearts couldn't take them. And so what he did was he took those pictures and sketched them into a sketch that still told you the difficulty and the atrocity, but made you want to look at it more and understand what those pictures were trying to tell. So, Mark, can you tell us from your point of view about those sketches and what an impact they've made, because they certainly did tell the story?
Thank you. I remember my art career before I started to really be affected by the Syria war was dealing with the Holocaust and other genocides. And one of the things that struck me is I just couldn't get these images out of my mind. And these were images from the past. So when I saw a picture of a man, one day I was in my classroom and I saw a picture of a man carrying this young girl who was clutching her blanket, like her little sleep blanket. And this image just went into my head and I couldn't get it out. So for my own sanity, I sketched it out because it was my way of kind of processing the image. And then I just started to do it all the time because I couldn't help it. I had to do it. But the other reason is I really think that in our society, we have a lot of, we click through things quickly. We go click, 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 click. And for me, I wanted to spend time with this image. I felt like I was doing a disservice to the human life that was torn away if I just looked at it and went on. So my way of doing that as an artist is to engage with the image and draw it and make it with my hand instead of just looking at it and moving on. And it almost like I can't not do it. It's almost like a thing I have to do, it feels like. And I didn't know how people would react. I just had to share it because I thought, here we are sitting here, you know, looking at this happen like it's a movie. It's on TV and just sitting here. And what are we going to do? Are we just going to sit there and watch? Or are we going to try to engage in it or try to talk about it? Because how can I stand in front of my students and have any credibility to talk about human rights or kindness or anything if I don't at least try to do a minimal amount? And that's what I'm trying to do. I do a little amount compared to what Suzanne, Fareed, and Abdul Kafi, who are, you know, always out there. I'm trying to just do what I can, and I'm an artist, so that's the way I go about it.
But perhaps in your vision, it's a little amount, but I've said this to you before, but it's brought a lot of comfort to so many. And I know that you engage your students consistently and you have them engage with people directly on the inside. And I know Abdul Kafi always says how this is actually extremely comforting, extremely helpful. And frankly, perhaps the only ear that people like Abdul Kafi and people are getting. And so it's so important that you continue. And we thank you for doing that. And it certainly, and I'll speak to my personal feelings, it helps me go on a daily basis because I remember that, you know what, there are people who are listening at times when it feels like there might not be. So please keep up with your work. And I know there's more projects coming down the line, perhaps, and we'll be able to talk.
Can I say one more thing real quick?
Absolutely.
While I have Abdul Kafi and Fareed, you are my family. You guys are my family. You're my brothers, okay? You are my brothers for always. We're not different at all. And I can't wait till the day I get to see you in person and hug you. So love to you. You're my brothers.
Yes. And we'll get back to Abdul Kafi and Fareed because I know we want to end with them. But I want to go back to Dr. Zeki for just a few minutes. And Dr. Zeki, you heard Fareed really take us sort of, not just from Idlib, but he sort of took us back into the big picture of Syria and reminded us, you know, about the Iranian regime, about what was going on in the big context. And sometimes we get so deep into specific details, we forget the original big picture of how this all started. What do you have to say, Dr. Zeki, to all of us and to the rest of the world about what took place in Syria and about how this work will continue till the very end? Because I know you always have incredible messaging. So please go ahead.
As everybody knows, Syria started as peaceful a protest against the Assad regime because of all the atrocities that he and his father have been committing for the last 50 years in Syria. From people disappearing for no reason just because they're opposed to the regime, political activists basically, to people who are arrested for doing social community work even. There was a project in Daria in the early 2000s where young college students met and decided to clean the streets. And these activists were arrested because they were working together. And the security services in Syria And when I say the security services, I have to define what their role is. Their role is protecting the regime, and these are tens of thousands of people employed just for the protection of the regime. They arrested these activists just for cleaning the street because they don't want anybody to think or work together or do anything like that. When the security services start killing people in the street with live ammunitions, arresting people in the beginning, they took them to prisons. They raped the men and women, and you know how psychologically devastating this is in the Middle East area, and definitely in Syria. Then they start going into houses and killing the men in front of their families, raping the women in front of their families, then killing everybody and leaving one person, usually a kid, to tell the story and tell the neighbors and make everybody just frightened and terrorized. And that's really the terrorist activity that took a place on a mass scale organized by the fascist regime in Damascus and continue for months. Then people in the army start defecting and leaving their posts because they don't want to kill civilians, they don't want to kill their brothers and sisters in Syria. And this is how the armed men and the fighters start protecting their neighborhood, protecting their neighbors from the regime, from the attacks, from the rape. And then, of course, we are here today where the Assad regime, the, the, there's a lot of noise, I think.
Can we ask everyone that's not speaking to please go on mute just for the background noise? Farid, it might be on your end. If we can ask you to go on mute, please.
I can tell him this in Arabic. فريد انت بتقدر تسكر الصوت.
فريد معلش اذا فيك بس تحط صوت على الميوت لانه جاي من عندك صوت قوي من ورا.
تمام.
شكرا كثير شكرا كثير.
تمام هيك؟
تمام كثير منيح شكرا. Go ahead,
Okay.
Dr. Zaki.
So the regime actually who helped form al-Nusra, who helped form even ISIS. There is evidence to that. Der Spiegel, a German magazine, reported about that a few years ago, and there is more reports coming out now. What people don't know that the leader of al-Nusra, Jolani, was in Assad prisons actually when the protests broke out in 2011. The people of Syria will not forget. We will not forget. We will not forget our prisoners. We will not forget the people who died under torture and executed for absolutely no reason. We will not forget the women and young girls who were raped in Assad prisons over and over to death, basically. We will never give up. And we will never waver in the face of this fascist regime. Each one of them will be brought to trials. And as you know, trials and cases, legal cases, has been brought to European courts as we speak, and they're continuing to be. Jamila Hassan, who is the head of the what they call the Air Force Security Service, which is basically the worst of the worst, is a fugitive now from the Interpol. He is he's supposed to be present in a German court. Of course, he will not be, but now he's a prisoner in Syria. He cannot leave Syria because if he does, the Interpol will pick him up and will continue these fights. The fight in Syria was not over control of land here or land here. The fight in Syria about changing the regime, changing the fascist regime to a democracy, giving the people their freedom, that basic human rights, basically, that everybody else in the world enjoy. and that fight will not end until we achieve that. And that's a promise on our part, and the Syrian people who left Syria mostly because of the fascist regime, that we will continue until we see the end to the butcher of Syria and his regime, and democracy take place in Syria, and people have their freedom and their basic human rights. And thank you.
Dr. Zaki, it's so important for us to always get back to how, frankly, the message is simple. It's just, and all these atrocities are because of dictators who don't want freedom to take place. So thank you so much. فريد، بدي اشكرك انت بالذات، لانه نحن ايامات وقت بنعمل هالمكالمات او بنشتغل على بروجكت بنعمل فوكس كثير على اشياء، فبننسى انه لازم نرجع دائما نحكي القصه من اول وجديد، لانه في دائما معنا ناس جداد او في ناس بتنسى. فلازم دائما نذكر انه كيف بدا الطريق للحريه، ووين ما كنا بطريق الثوره، وين ما كنا يعني الافكار. لازم نعرف انه الطريق للحريه بدا من 7 سنين وحيكمل ان شاء الله لنوصل للحريه. فما بعرف اذا في شيء بتحب تقوله اخير.
ايه، ان شاء الله الثوره مستمره رغم القصف ورغم الدمار ورغم كل شيء. وان شاء الله نحن اهم شيء هلا بدنا المعتقلين من سجون الاسد. من ايام سلم قائم الاسد بالاف المعتقلين، كل نهار عم يموت بالمعتقلين بالمعتقلات، النساء الرجال والاطفال، كل نهار عم يموت الاف بالسجون. ولكن للاسف كل العالم واقف وعم بيتفرج عليهم، وما في حدا عم يحاكم الاسد. شكرا كثير لك سوزان.
شكرا لك يا فريد، شكرا. وان شاء الله مثل ما قال مارك بنجتمع يا رب هيك وجها لوجه قريبا بسوريا حرة.
ان شاء الله.
Farid, we were thanking Farid for always bringing us back to the big picture, so that we never forget as we discuss, details and projects and focuses, that this all started in a simple way, and the big picture must always be told. And once again, he brought us to a perfect way to end the call today, and that is he was reminding us of the detainees, the men, women, and children that are still in Assad's prisons, that are dying and being tortured on a daily basis. As a matter of fact, and this is what I wanted to come back to, one of the points from Abdul Khafi earlier when he spoke. Over the last couple of weeks, the Assad regime has put out lists and lists of detainees who died in prison. And, this was a little bit unprecedented, because we know that over 50 years people have been detained, even though they were innocent or it was for political reasons. We know that people have been tortured, and we know that people have died. But for the first time, in a way, the Assad regime was admitting and saying, listen, here are the dead people that died in our prisons. And of course, according to the regime, most people died of heart attacks. However, we know through stories told from others that have left the prisons that torture is the way that most people have died in Assad's prisons. But Assad basically was giving a message to the world that he, for those who oppose him, he will kill them. And if anyone continues to oppose him, he will kill them. And if in the future people decide to oppose him, he will kill them. But he does not know that seeds of the revolution were sown, and the revolution will continue, as Farid just said. And I think we're seeing his daughter right now. Thank you, Farid, for showing us your daughter. But going back to Abdul Qafi, you said that people prefer to die than to be killed by the Assad regime or have to live under the Assad regime. And that's actually a common story we heard. That when these detainee lists came out, mothers and family members were almost relieved to know that their children have died, so that they don't have to endure the torture in prisons. And this brings us back to remembering the 30,000 political prisoners in Iran who were killed by the Iranian regime as well 30 years ago. The story continues. The Iranian people and the Syrian people have to work together and band together, which we are, and today is an absolute example of that. But until all the detainees are out, until the Syrian and the Iranian people have their freedom from their regime, Abdul Qafi, tell us one last thing and we will be done with our call today, but you take us out. Tell us what's on your mind. You are on mute. Unmute
Hello?
yourself.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Hello. In
Yes.
fact, I have more than one point that I want to speak about. First of all, in fact, nothing evokes me more than speaking about detainees. Those people who we will not forget. Those people that we are thinking of them every single minute. What they suffering, what they live. In fact, they are in prison just because they want freedom, just because we were together. So this is another reason that will pushes us to go on, to stand for forever, to ask for our freedom. We will be on this issue. I mean, freedom, revolution, forever, till the day we, our soul leaves leave our bodies. In fact, this revolution is an idea. It's not a body. It's not a land. It's an idea, and the idea never dies. I want to say that yes, the next generation and the next and the next will ask about the same issue, our freedom, because we didn't ask a lot. We wanted just to live like all people all over the world live. In fact, what's going inside the Assad prison these days happened many times before, and we can mention, for example, what happened in the Iranian prisons in 1982. Just imagine 30,000 people are killed during maybe days or months just by a word from, Al-Malali. Just imagine that one word which kills more than 30,000. Just why? Just because they said, we don't want them, we don't want this person, we don't want this regime. Come on, what this crime? I mean, of course, I can't imagine that the international community might be silent about such crimes if these crimes happened against other people, but because they are against us, those people who are oppressed for hundreds of years. In fact, for dozens of years, all the international community is silent. Those people who passed away in the Iranian regime prisons, what they did, what their faults, just because they want to live as free people, just because they want to be not like slaves. I mean, I don't know how this international community can be silent towards such crimes. Exactly, and again, of course, this happened in the Assad, the father, president in 1982. He killed dozens and thousands again just because they said no for their control. We see this, close mentality of Assad and Iran. We think that, in fact, those people who commit execution and killing in Assad prisons, they might be even Iranian officers who came here to kill Syrians. Those militias, of course, who don't know any meaning of humanity, but the blood and blood. This is the only word that they know. In fact, we support the Iranian people who are going in demonstrations against this regime who's killing people inside and outside Iran. We support them, and we hope they get their freedom, as we know that they hope for us to get our freedom. In fact, the other point that I want to speak about is those people who are outside Syria. They always said and ask, what can we do for you, those people who are inside Syria? In fact, we don't ask a lot. We don't ask more than Mark Nilsson do. In fact, he said that like what you see, and you exactly, and you also, Zan, you say we do nothing in comparison with you. No, in fact, you're doing more than we do, because in fact we are forced to do this. We are involved here on the land, but although you are living there away from what's happening, sometimes you don't see, sometimes you don't hear these cries. Nevertheless, you are in touch with us. You are you are always speaking for us, cry for us, write, speak for us. And this is not something little. No, we appreciate this. We feel this. Imagine that when I want to relax, when I was, for example, I feel angry with what's going on, I go to Twitter and Facebook just to read some of those words from people outside Syria, like you, like Mark and his students, and the other people who support us. Really, it makes me relaxed. It gives me, the feeling of humanity again. After some times, I feel that I forget there is any kind of humanity on earth. But when I read your comments, I read your words. Believe me, this helps me a lot more than you think. Maybe nothing gives me life more than my family and your words. In fact, you said, Mark, that we're your brothers. In fact, you're my best brother and best friend, because really what you do, it gives me hope, life, and dream in the better life in the future.
Well, Abdul Qafi, that was probably a beautiful, beautiful way to end the call. You've certainly inspired us. You and Farid today have given us inspiration. And we thank you, and we promise you we will, until the end of days, we will keep doing this until we get a free Syria and a free Iran. And we will get there with hearts like these, like everyone here on the call. We will get there. So thank you, everyone, for joining us on this call. We will continue as we always do, and we will talk soon, and we will keep each other updated. Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.